Oh my gosh, I have just loved what's going on in the chat. We're laying a buffet, a holiday buffet table for each other, and it's so delightful. And that's what we're about today. Friends, welcome to this Get Ready for Advent webinar, where we're going to go over 5 things that you can do to have less stress and more yumminess in your Advent preparations, which means this month, right? We're a month out, really, from a little less than a month, but don't let that freak you out, from Advent. And so I wanted to come on, and one of the things that I do in the Worship Design Studio is I consider myself your biggest fan, your biggest cheerleader. And so I just wanted to come on and give you some things to think about doing as part of your preparation for Advent, so that when you get to Advent, you can have a deeply meaningful season all yourself. Even if you're a leader, you can also worship because you have prepared. So friends, many of you are people who have been on webinars with me before. Some of you are brand new. So let me just say, my name is Dr. Marcia McFee. I'm the creator and visionary of the Worship Design Studio. And for over 25 years, we're getting more like 28 or so, I have been teaching worship. I'm a professor of worship. I have been teaching out workshops all around. I've been around for a long time. And so now I have the deep privilege of curating the Worship Design Studio, where we help people along with both fully scripted worship series that you can adapt yourself, but also education and support, and a community in our website. So welcome to those of you who have never met me before or the Worship Design Studio. I'm so glad that you're here. Now, friends, you can see on the screen already these 5 things that we're going to talk about. You know, a lot of people have been talking about, for gifts these days, they want to give experiences, not things. And so, friends, you can see that these words that I'm going to talk about today, yes, they'll have concrete actions connected to them, but the deep purpose of this is for you to have these things in your Advent prep. And they are experiences, they are states of being. So the state of being where you can pause regularly in daily rituals, immerse yourself, create, surprise, delight. These are the driving factors that we're going to talk about, each one. And I'm a believer in getting this going. So let's do it. All right, friends. So the first thing we want to talk about is pause. So create your own rituals for Advent prep. So in other words, tend to your spiritual needs by planning a specific ritual for this year. Now, I have an early morning ritual that consists all the time of journaling, of reading, devotion, of lighting a candle, of having my coffee, because that's as much an important ritual as anything else, right? But I'm going to add to that starting tomorrow, because our Advent prep, we're going to think tomorrow is the day to start, because tomorrow it's 24 days before Advent 1. And so it's kind of like an Advent calendar, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But I'm going to add to that, doing this part of my ritual here in my office, where I have set up a Christmas tree and lights, and I have my angel wings. I'm not going to wear them every day, but I'm going to have them right here in the corner, and I'm going to leave these lights on all night, because last night I walked by here and, you know, in the middle of the night, when you're up doing the things you need to do in the middle of the night, and I was filled with this wonder and awe and gratitude, just because of the delightful scene of these lights and the angel wings lit up by them. So I'm going to make that my daily ritual, something that just delights you, something that's simple, that you don't have to think about too much, but you want to fill up your well first. Have you heard this story about the jar? I heard this a long time ago. It's an organizational thing where you have a jar and you have a bunch of rocks of different sizes. And if you put all the little stuff in, all of those, you know, details and everything that you on the to-do list, all those, and then you get the substantial rock, which is what you need, the important stuff, what you need in order to continue to do all those little things, and you try to put that in last, it's not going to fit. But if you put the big one in first, you take care of the important thing, which is the strength, the centering, the depth that you need in order to do all the little things. And then you put the little things in after the big thing, it all fits. So this is just a reminder that we must tend to our own delight and light as we get into the detailness of this prepping for Advent. So I'm going to think of this jar. Maybe I'll do this too. Maybe I'll add this to my little scene back here on my piano. You can get those little fairy lights, battery operated fairy lights. I think I'm going to get myself, I have a jar, and put those in there and put that there as a reminder to fill my jar with delight and light so that I can have the strength to do all kinds of things. In the chat, if you're thinking of something that you might do that could be an easy ritual that would remind you to delight, to center, to take care of your precious spirit first, so that you can do all of those things. If you're thinking of something, go ahead and put that in the chat so that we can share with each other. All right, so reserve time for your rituals first, and then everything will follow. All right, friends, so that's the pause. The second one is immerse. Now, as I have studied creativity techniques, and I've done that for over 20 years, what we know is that when we take even just a couple of hours to immerse ourselves completely in something, then that jumpstarts the brain. It's kind of jumper cables for the brain to have things working in the background, if you want to use a computer software metaphor, to have that working in the background so that you are steeped in what you're preparing for, even though you have to tend to the Sundays, the actual Sundays that you have to do before Advent gets here, right? So taking just a couple of hours, and I hope this can happen in the next few days if it hasn't happened for you already, because I know some of you are Uber planner aheaders, and so you've already done this, but do a deep dive. Now I say in a curated environment. So that's what I just did in my office so that I could. Now, of course, I have already planned Advent because, I did that in the summer. So it is true that sometimes in the summer, I will have Christmas things up, right? Because I'm writing my series in the summer for Advent. But curate a little space where you can get in the mood, where you can be immersed. So immersion is as much about the environment as what's in front of you. What this does is help cue the brain. So if you do a deep dive immersion, I'm going to tell you in just a moment what I think that should entail. But if you create a cozy little spot, a cozy little corner in your favorite chair with some Christmas decorations around, even now, 1st of November, then every time you go back to that chair after that, your brain knows, boom, we're in Advent planning mode. And it shortcuts sort of the trying to get into the mood, trying to get back to it. So this is a little sort of brain science hack that we know about creativity, is if you cue the brain that this particular feeling, this particular environment is where I do my Advent planning, then it will help you get right in the mood and get right to it whenever you need to get back to it. So do a couple of hours. This is all you need to get the brain on board. Now, uninterrupted hours and ways that you can jumpstart your planning. So many of you are already Worship Design Studio subscribers, or you have purchased one of our series for Advent. And so using one of our fully scripted worship series to get it rolling right now is one of the jumper cable kind of. I helped my dad jump his car yesterday, so you can see it influenced my words there. But if you're starting from scratch, if you're doing your own series, which is also fabulous, we have ways to help you organize that process. Having a creative process in the first place is the key to actually feeling like you're getting somewhere, knowing where you're at, and being ready when the time comes. So there's a couple of links there, and Jenna can put those in the chat so you can click right on them if you want, but we'll send them in our follow-up email with the recording as well. So Advent series, using one of ours or your own, and we have in the virtual studio, which is a fun environment, we have the whole process laid out for you to learn and sort of check along the way. How am I doing? Am I caring for all the things and getting a creative process? Okay, so the deep dive process, let me show you what I think that in those 2 hours you could do that would really set you on the path if you haven't done it already. Scriptures and synopses. So that means making sure you know what, read through the scriptures and either tweak the synopses of my series if you're using one of our series, or writing your own. And a synopsis, if you're not familiar with that, is a 2 to 3 sentence sort of put the message in concrete form. What is the main message for each one of those services? Once you have that, then everybody, all the ritual artists, will be able to help you in ways that are really concrete and really to the point. They won't waste their time going too far afield from where you're going because you've told them, right? So scriptures and synopses, order of worship. For those of you who are using our series, reading that overview of worship, that overview of the order of worship will help you really get a sense of what's there and how you're going to tweak it. Identifying special thread items. If you're starting from scratch, this is a big thing. And that is to say, okay, our order of worship for Advent, is there something we want to tweak a little bit because of the theme that we're using? And are there certain thread items that we can do every week? A way of praying, a theme song, a prayer song. This is the way I create my series. And what it does is it creates continuity. It helps the theme come out every Sunday. And it's just delightful because things that perhaps are new the first Sunday become heartfelt because they repeat the rest of the series. It also helps consolidate your creating, your planning, your writing of scripts. And then go over Advent 1. Either go over my script if you're using one of our series and edit according to how you're going to edit it. Remember, we believe and we know and we expect that you are going to be adapting for your context. So you're going to adapt that Advent 1 script. And that, if you can just really set a timer and dive into those things, that is going to be a huge, huge way forward, a huge jumpstart. If you do that in the next few days, and then everything begins to fall into place and the brain is working back in the background, even though you're going to turn your attention to the Sunday worship that's coming up, which probably for many of you is All Saints. Okay, so that's the second thing, and that is to immerse ourselves, to do a deep dive, and to really begin to let that work in us. Like I said, many of you who have taken me seriously and have started to plan ahead, you might have already done this. That's awesome. But if you haven't, never fear. That's why we're doing this webinar today and not in a couple of weeks, because you have time now to begin to let it steep and also take some action items. All right. Yay. Okay. Third thing, surprise your team. I want you to abandon the conference table for a time of Advent planning work that is hygge-fied. Okay, let me tell you what that is. Danish people have this term called hygge. And hygge is when you create an environment, a situation, a gathering that is cozy and it's yummy and delightful. It's like that imaginary holiday buffet we started to lay as we were waiting for the top of the hour, and people said what they were going to bring to the potluck, to the holiday gathering. You were already doing it. So I want you to abandon that conference table at the church, be in someone's home, or do your best to create in your church some hygge, right? It could involve hot drinks. It could involve cozy blankets. It could involve inviting people to wear their favorite Christmas slippers or Christmas socks and working in their sock feet. But the point is that we want to come to our planning with a sense of energy that's like forward rather than okay, let's get her done. Let's just get in there and punch it out, right? We want to be what's possible, right? So we're creating an immersion experience for our team. All right. So no matter what stage you're at, next week, I'm hoping that whatever stage you're at, you can hygge-fy your environment for whatever planning you're doing for Advent, all right? So playful work, right? That is a key thing, is that our work becomes playful in that it helps to garner the imagination and the possibilities. All right, so playful work, here's what I think you could do at your planning next week if you haven't done this already. Do an episode read through of Advent 1. That's why I'm saying visionaries, pastors, do that editing of Advent 1 as you see it happening in your space, your adaptation, and then do a read through of it with your team, right? Including the children's time, right? Which is in a separate document. So make sure you have that. But do a read through so that everybody can start to get on board with the feel of that. All right, identify hoped for outcomes. So instead of diving right away into nitty gritty details, who's going to do what, you know, that kind of thing, I want you to pause before you get there and identify hoped for outcomes. So for instance, if you have decided to do our Calm and Bright Advent series, that is a celebration of Silent Night, maybe your hope for outcome is a little peace in the midst of chaos, right? A little calm and a little bright. Maybe your hope for outcome, if you're doing our Reflecting the Sacred, is for an eye-opening experience where we see the divine at work in so many ways, right? So an eye-opening experience. Talk a little bit about what that is and what you hope people will feel, right? This is about how you hope people will be stirred in their souls. If you're doing our Scrooge one, which is called God Bless Us, Everyone, based on the story of Scrooge, maybe you're hoping for some sense of second chances. Oh, you know, what is it? So based on the theme, as you've read through it, what do you hope that people will feel as they experience this worship that you've just read through? Too often we jump right into the details and we forget to think about, pray about, put out, you know, into the ether around us as we plan those soulful things, right? So spend some time there. Work then separately on various ritual arts. So you could, from wherever you are in the living room or what have you, get your, you know, refill of your hot drink and a goodie and go to your corners. And some people are going to work on, well, let's get to this slide, the ritual arts, different ritual arts. Some people are going to work on some of our suggestions for small group study materials. Again, if you're doing your own series, you want to think about how do people engage either individually or in groups if you want to do that. So that's kind of a verbal arts thing. Music notes, look at our music notes at all the listing of suggestions we have and tweak that. And if you're doing your own, then do a brain dump of hymn suggestions based on keywords from your theme. Start to gather the fodder for that if you're at that point. Then have some of your dramatic arts. We put children in the worship design studio. We put children in that category. So look through our scripts for children's time for the series if you're doing one of our series, or have your children, your folks who deal with children's time, think about, if you're starting from scratch, how could we do something really delightful that would bring that message alive for children? Community engagement ideas, visual and media arts. So you're going to spend some time sort of looking at deep diving into these different things, right? And then you'll come back together and solidify your decisions. This is when you're getting into the nitty gritty. This is when you need to decide, okay, this is what we thought about. What about this? And you go, yeah, that's great. And we think so-and-so can help do that, you know, build that manger or whatever it is. So think about inviting to this fun, hygge-fied, curated space meeting. Think about inviting someone who is a host with the most, right? So can keep the drinks refilled, can keep the food happening, whatever it is, that can keep the music on or off, or fade up or fade down or whatever. Somebody who's paying attention to things so that you as participants on the team are not having to manage that while you're doing it. This is such What a great role for someone who's never going to be on the worship team, but is such a great host, right? So that would be delightful. The other thing is you might want to invite somebody who's an Uber organizer to take notes, especially when you get to that last thing you're going to do where all the ideas are coming back in and you're thinking about what you want to do. Somebody who can take notes for you so that you can keep in the brainstorming mode and you don't have to put your head down into the paper. All right, so think about that. This may be one and the same person, who knows? Or it might be a couple of people. But it's also good to have these people there because I always think that a team, and some of you may be thinking, a team, I have a team. Well, you know, yourself, maybe you're a accompanist, so you may have to think about if you have a part-time accompanist that is a very set number of hours just for worship. Think about, if you can, subsidizing just a couple of hours for them so that they can be in on this kind of planning, because it will make their participation in the moment, even if they don't do anything else besides show up at worship to play, it will make their participation feel like they were in it from the beginning. So I think that when you have people who work together a lot, one of the best things you can do is introduce a new person into the space, because then we all sort of step it up a notch, whether consciously or not, we do, because we know, we see ourselves through their eyes, right? So that's another reason to invite somebody who's outside of the worship team and has other roles. All right, so friends, that is the surprise element. Surprise your team with that yummy way of being together. It's like having a Christmas party. And of course, if your whole team is watching this, then it's not a surprise. But it's like having a Christmas party. But, you know, if we wait for the Christmas party till, you know, towards the end, we're exhausted, right? So let this be like this delightful sort of planning party. All right. Okay, the next element of creating a pre-Advent planning season that really fills us up is create. Treat your worship prep to-do list, because you're going to come out of that team gathering with a to-do list. Treat it like a pre-Advent calendar where you open up every day something to do, and maybe you even treat yourself to something once it's done, so that a little bit each day can help manage the stress, so that you know by the time you get to the end of the pre-Advent, which is Advent 1 Sunday, you are really in great shape. Now, I'm going to tell you about a little thing that I did for you at the end of the webinar around this. But the whole idea is, the concept of it is to treat each day in this pre-Advent planning with some creative delight, right? So here's some hacks. Some of you have heard these hacks before, but it's great to remind you. And for those of you who've never studied with me before, this is a shift from planning worship 1 week at a time. In other words, just because you have Advent 1 done doesn't mean you're going to wait until the week before Advent 2 to plan that week. You're actually going to do all of that script planning before you even get to Advent. This is what I call creating in batches, and it saves time. This is what the creativity experts tell us, and I believe it's true. It saves time to do your Advent 1, let's say, and then this is the way I create the series that you all use from the Worship Design Studio. I create that. I decide which things are going to be thread items. In other words, which things will repeat, because part of ritual, yummy ritual, is repetition. So you get with your series, your worship series, you get a lens looking at Advent in a different way you've ever had it before, because the theme is different. And yet within that theme, you have things that are familiar or become familiar over time, because you repeat them every week. And so I do Advent 1, and then I copy, paste for the 4 weeks of Advent. And then I tweak the things that are different for every week, right? And so this is a batch. You do it in a batch. And that's what's going to happen after your team meeting, where you've kind of, you know, you've paid attention to all the various things that have to do with worship besides just Sunday morning, you know, small groups, visuals and media, community engagement, all these things. Then you're going to be able to do that. Once you've tweaked that Advent 1, got it where you want it, then do the rest of the Advent services, 1 through 4. Do it in a batch. Once those scripts are done, because here's the thing, once that's done, you can give that to someone. If you use slides in your worship, which most churches are doing now, whether you're just live in the space or live and online, slides, you can give that to someone and they can type in everything that needs to have a slide. Now you just type it in with white words on a black backdrop, because the week before Advent 1, when you set the visuals in your space, you're going to have a photo shoot, right? You're going to have a photo shoot and you are going to create backgrounds for those slides. So all you need right now is to get the slides done and typed out for all of the Advent services, right? That's a batch. And then you can put those backdrops in. All right, so create in batches. Work on all the visuals for every week and Christmas Eve in one batch. It may be that the visuals don't change at all, except for lighting more and more candles each week. You've set your visuals, but Christmas Eve, likely there's something a little different, right? And Lord have mercy, Christmas Day this year is on a Sunday. So you'll think about that. But think about these things in batches so that you are not planning worship 1 week at a time. Because when you do the creative process each week, you are reinventing the wheel each week. And so it does save time. All right, assign tasks that match interests. So matching interests, if somebody is an uber fast typer, get them to make those slides. If somebody loves to talk on the phone, give them the list of how many readers you need every week and get them on the phone, right? Assign tasks that people love to do, things they love to do. If you have a group of crafters, oh my gosh, and you've decided you're doing Angels Among Us, Angels Among Us, Angels Among Us, and you're going to do feather keychains, get those crafters together. Again, create a great environment, hygge-fied your environment, music, snacks, Christmas tree, and let them do their crafting thing. So it's going to, just assign those tasks to people who would love doing it. And when they see those used in worship, it really connects them to the worship. Now, here's something I'm going to suggest that I usually suggest doing your Q to Q, your walkthrough in the space, not with all the readers and such, but all the leaders. Do it 2 weeks before instead of 1 week before. All right. So what this is going to do is to give you time, because here's the thing, Thanksgiving happens right before Advent 1, right? And so if you wait to do your Q to Q and you figure out something that needs to be tweaked or changed only on the Sunday before before Thanksgiving, you don't have very much time because you don't want to be stressed during Thanksgiving. So I'm going to suggest, here's a hack for Advent. Do that Q to Q walkthrough 2 weeks before so that you have time to fix, shift, tweak, whatever you need to do, and not in Thanksgiving week. All right. So that is also going to bring more fun and less stress, knowing that you have given yourself some padding. All right. It's all about giving yourself the time to actually do the creative process. Okay. So that's create. Now, finally, delight. All right. Here's what I want to suggest that will make your Advent even more delightful for you and your community, your church community, and the community around you, is to choose one way to create engagement for the wider community. So I'm talking about outside the church or open house, hours in the church, some way to connect with the community, the wider community, because what this does is it takes your theme and it creates a way to spread that hope, love, peace, and joy in ripples outside of your building. Now, hopefully that's happening in your live streams as well, but still, friends, that's still an in-house thing for the most part. So what we want to do is put a public face on your theme so that others can experience. So give your church the gift of connection and ongoing delight by choosing one way to create engagement for the wider community. What you see here is a picture of one of our worship design studio churches that when we first brought out Angels Among Us worship series, this is the way that they did their angel wings outside their church. And you see people, you can stand in front of it, take a picture. This is great Christmas card fodder. This is great social media fodder. This is the way that in that series, we're suggesting that you invite people to engage, even if they're not going to come in your doors on Sunday morning or watch your live stream or your recorded worship. Just let the ripples out, right? So here's some more examples of that from our series. So last year was the inn, that top picture where you see the barn all set up. This was at my partner's church, and this little scenario was so sweet. And again, offering a place for people to take pictures in front of it. This was in the narthex, but can also be done out front. But you could also have hours, and this is a wonderful way to get some volunteers who won't do anything else, don't feel like they have the talents to volunteer in the choir or the bells or what have you, but they do have time to come up and spend a couple of hours. And so having Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 7 to 9 p.m. open house hours, or 5 to 7, or whatever works for your community, with some music playing and some sort of beautiful setting where people can come, take their pictures, and connect. The blue Christmas tree is something that I suggest that you do, is have your blue Christmas service outside if the weather is good. But a way to invite the wider community. Sometimes it's just the church doors that make it feel like, going inside, make it feel like too risky or too vulnerable or whatever. But if you have a blue Christmas tree, a big honking blue Christmas tree outside your church, and you do a short gathering around it, you can even get candles, those little battery operated tea lights that are blue, and invite people to come if they've lost a loved one, if they're feeling sorrowful, depressed, anxious about the world, come, and a short comforting service there. Maybe have it more than once, but do it in a way that invites the community. On the lower right-hand side, you see a picture of a church that has paper chains hanging outside. And this recalls our series about Scrooge, right? Because at the beginning of the series in God Bless Us Everyone, we were telling the story of Christmas past, present, and future. And one of the things that happens at the very beginning of that story is that we see Bob Cratchit, is that his name? And he's chained with the heaviness of the past and chained with his regrets. And so one of the things that we suggest for that series is you give everybody a chain that has enough rings in it for every day of the Advent. So it's kind of like an Advent calendar, only you're unchaining things and letting go of things every day, letting go of regrets, letting go of things that you can't control. And so you wouldn't have to do that for people. You could do a whole chain for people who are coming, but you could also just have chains outside in a display where you invite people just with a placard that says, come, take a chain off, place it in the manger, let go of something that you've been holding on to that is causing you distress, that kind of thing. Then, this lovely picture of this kind of squirrely labyrinth spiral thing. This is done in a gym, but it could be done in a parking lot, right? We have had worship design studio churches who have done it in their yard with pine boughs, many different ways to do this, but creating some beautiful journey that is easily walked, even if it's just down the sidewalk and you have luminaries on either side and a sign at either end that says, we pray that your journey in life is illumined with whatever it is that you need this season, right? So up the delight quotient. There's been times when I have done this and just go and sit and watch people interact with it. It's really quite special. All right, so upping the delight factor with examples from our series. I am going to go to the chat. I have seen it kind of happening over here. Jenna, could you come on and let me know if there are any questions about any of these 5 things? And then I'm going to tell folks about some goodies. I do want to say, friends, before I forget, because it's just popping to my mind right now, those of you who are doing our 2 featured Advent series this year, the new one, which is Reflecting the Sacred, and the one that we have kind of revamped, Angels Among Us, because there's a new book out that goes with it. Those 2 things, next week on Monday, I am going to hold a live Q&A session about all things details, right? So that's why I would love in the next few days, especially if you're doing those series, for you to take a couple of hours, do a deep dive so you can get your questions and come on Monday. I'm going to do an hour on each one of those in the Worship Design Studio website, and you'll get an email about that, about the details on that in the next couple of days. So just wanted to put that out there. Jenna, what do you have for us?
I just saw a question come through. Will the Q&As on Monday be recorded? Yes, they will. So if you are, if you're on the website, you'll get access to those recordings. So for sure, no worries.
And even more than that, if you have a question and you're not going to be on there, please email that to us or ask us in the Worship Design Studio website so that we can address it on that Q&A. And of course, we're always in the website answering your questions as well, but would be great to have your questions because somebody else will have that question too, guaranteed, right? So I'll address it in the webinar. Great.
And Jola says, do the chat comments record also? I believe so, Jola. We're actually trying out a new feature on Monday for the live stream. So we're actually not totally sure exactly how it's going to look in the recording. I think it does record the chat, but we will find out. So we've got some general questions. I want to go back to what Marcia has shared already. Someone said that I didn't realize I could adapt your resources for my own context.
Oh my
very
gosh.
freeing idea.
Yes. This is, we expect that this is going to happen. So those of you who are using our materials for the first time, I want to reiterate that there is no way that I can design something perfect for every congregation because we serve over 10 denominations all across North America and some across the pond, both ways. And so it's impossible for me to know all the context. And so I put things out there and then you adapt them, wording, say those leader parts the way you would say them. Read through what I have there, say them the way you would say them, or say them exactly the way I did, but know that you can absolutely adapt anything, adapt the music. If the hymns that we have suggested, we try to do some really familiar hymns, as well as introduce some new things. But if you have something else that's a heart song that would go with the theme and the feel of the moment better than what I've suggested, you go for it. That's what I mean by going through these scripts and adapting them, tweaking them. Sometimes people take out whole sections. I will often suggest a way of doing prayers, and somebody will think, there's enough different in this series already for us that we're going to do our prayers exactly the way we usually do them. And that's an absolutely wonderful adaptation because only you can know how much bandwidth your congregation has for something new. All right. Move the order of worship around if that feels too unfamiliar. The point here is that I hope that whatever you feel like could get in the way of your people hearing, feeling, sensing, knowing deeply the message, get those things out of the way, and so that they can really hear the message. All right. It's good to stretch people a little bit, and you don't always want to cater to the squeaky wheels, right? Just because a couple of people might have a problem with it. That's part of growing the spiritual maturity of a congregation. But we really want to, especially if this is the first time that you're going to be doing one of our series that might have some very different things, you want to really assess how it is that your congregation can stay open to it all. All right? Great.
Awesome. We did have a question come up when you were talking about Q2Q rehearsals. Yes. What are they and how do churches use them?
Yes, absolutely. So a cue to cue rehearsal is something I get from my theater background. My first career was in professional dance and musical theater. And a cue to cue rehearsal is when you go in the space. You don't do this around a conference table, right? You're in the space and you have your main leaders, not all the readers and everybody. You just need leaders who then are going to give the instructions to the readers, right? So it's not like a dress rehearsal where everybody has to show up, but the main leaders, excuse me, the main leaders are there and you walk through everything in the space. And so you're going to say, okay, where does everybody start in the space? Then you're going to try out, if you're using one of our scripts, there's the threshold moment. And so this might be new for you. You're going to try out playing that music underneath the spoken word, if that's what's in the script, and you want to try that. And you want to test that for levels, sound levels. You want to make sure that the pianist isn't like banging out the melody underneath your words and distracting from the words. So you're going to go through those things that you need to practice. You need to rehearse, but then you're just going to do your, how do we get into the next thing and how do we get out of the next thing, right? So it's the transitions that you're really looking at. And then you're seeing things like, oh, well, you know what? We have this big vase with these feathers coming out of it for Angels Among Us. And we know that the readers for the scripture need to go right here and we don't have room. So then you're going to tweak where things are and figure out where people are, right? So this is it's almost, you could call it a technical rehearsal in some ways, because it's not a full dress rehearsal where you're just doing the whole thing, but you're going to do the pieces of it that you need to run to make sure that you know what you're doing and that they work, and making the necessary adjustments. All right. I hope that's helpful. But the most important thing is that you do it in the space and you kind of know when you do it. Now, 2 weeks before, you're not going to have the visual setup, but you're going to have someone who knows what the visual setup is there, so they can describe to you where things are going to be, so that you can make sure that you have the space that you need for whatever you're doing. All right.
Yes. We just got a question, suggestions for small congregations who have a worship planning team of one.
Yes. Well, you're going to pause, immerse, create, surprise, and delight yourself. All right. All of those things you're going to give to yourself, but you're also going to do that thing I said about matching tasks with interests. Even if you don't have a team, you can draw people in to help you with various tasks. And this is the only way that you as a solo pastor will be able to do sensory rich worship. And that is to draw people into just particular tasks, even if you're the only one on the planning, the design team. All right. You're going to figure out what you can do and then how you can get help with those little things, right? And that is the key to doing that. You actually have a team. You always have a team of more than one, because you are always the visionary designer. And then, like a filmmaker, I wrote a book called Think Like a Filmmaker. You're going to pull in the people that can help you actually pull it together, which means you may not do like a ton of things. You may decide that you're going to only do this thing, right? This one thing, because that's all the help you have. And that's the decisions you have to make, right? To actually pause, immerse, create, surprise, and delight yourself. Because if you're getting to be too overwrought and overwhelmed, then you're not going to be any good, because you are the preacher, you are the everything, right? And so your spiritual well-being is super important. So you have to gauge things like that.
Yes. So we just 2 more things I want to mention before we move on. I do see some questions coming through that are specific to certain series. Friends, we are kind of doing a general overview of Advent today on this webinar. So if you have questions about specific series, please reach out to us through Marcia@marciamcfee.com on email or through the website, and we'll be able to go into more detail about the specific themes that you're interested in there.
Yes. And we can pull those from this chat as well, Jenna.
Yes.
We can make sure that if you've asked a question here, we've pulled it, and we'll include that. If it's about Angels Among Us and Reflecting the Sacred, I'll talk about those in those series specific webinars, because we have friends on here who are using our series, who are not using our series. And if you're using our series, we have actually people using we have 7 to choose from for Advent. So we have people using a lot of various ones. So we wanted to address all of you before we got really specific next week.
The last general question that I've kind of seen come up recently on that note is, I'm assuming that musical and hymn suggestions have all been given copyright permission to use. We still broadcast online worship services, and copyright licensing is important. How does it work with Facebook, etc.?
Right. So in our music doc, we always say that we give you suggestions, but you are in charge of your individual church's permissions, unless we say otherwise. So number one, all of our original music for our series is already, because you are part of Worship Design Studio and you're using our series, you have the rights to use it, stream it, post it, whatever. Okay, so that's all our original music. Then there are some instances where we suggest a theme song, and we have gotten the rights for that, paid for the rights for you. And we will say that clearly in that music document, right? But hymns and songs and anthems, because you're going to adapt, we're not going to, there's no way we can have a Worship Design Studio blanket license that would cover you all. That's church by church, and it's song by song. Now, here's what I want to suggest that you do, and that is if you have a CCLI license, and this is something that, many years ago, having that was covering a lot of things. But I will tell you that a couple of decades ago, now, maybe 15 years ago, many of the major hymn publishing publishers went to onelicense.net. And so your CCLI license actually doesn't cover as much as it used to cover. If you're doing a lot of contemporary Christian music, then CCLI is the one for you. But onelicense.net also has a recording and streaming license. And if you're doing a lot of hymnody from hymnals and a lot of the anthems that we suggest, because we do that direct, we most usually use J.W. Pepper as our place where we go to suggest anthems. And a lot of those publishers are under onelicense.net. So that is really, those things are the things that you, as you would normally do, even if you weren't using our series, you would be checking those copyrights and making sure you had the right ones. Okay, I hope that's helpful. All right. I see a question, do you need both CCLI and one license? If you're doing a lot of contemporary Christian music, yes, both would be good. And of course, it's scaled depending on the size of your congregation. So you're paying according to the number of people who worship with you. And yes, licensing issues can be complicated. So CLVI, I think CVLI, is for movie clips, particular movie clips. And so no, the projection on the screen in the space is covered by your regular CCLI or one license for use of those. Once you stream it, that's a different license. That's a streaming license, but it's not the CVLI. CVLI really has to do with movie clips. All right. We can, on the Worship Design Studio, we have some links to much more thorough copyright advice. So I'm just telling you some of the general things, but in terms of using our series, always read through those music notes, because we will tell you if there are things that we have already gotten paid for you to use and stream. And likely those are things that music thread items that are going to repeat week after week. Yes. All right. Jenna, anything else before we start to bring it to a close? I want to tell people about the goodies.
We did have one more question about asking to speak more specifically about our children's resources and how those might differ from each series. How could a children's education leader work with those?
Yes. Well, we often, and I think most of our Advent series are done by our children's guru, Mark Burrows, and he writes scripts. So you can literally hand this to somebody and have them do that because it's all scripted out. One of the big things that Mark Burrows does so well is engagement. So it's not just sit and talkie, right? There's usually some way of actively engaging the children, which I appreciate so much because it makes so much difference. He also has taught me years ago, this was an aha, that, we often use object lessons, right? Metaphors for things. And there's a certain age that you start to get metaphors, and it's pretty late. So he often uses active ways of getting at the message. So in other words, you can take a look at the children's scripts for our series, and you can see in the Angels Among Us, because feathers is our anchor image. He has some way of interacting with feathers every week. Like the week about peace, he gets everybody, every child a feather, and they try to throw it down like they're mad on the ground, but the feather just goes beep, dee, 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 and he uses that to talk about peace. And so, one of the things that you'll want to do is look through those scripts. If you're using one of our series, look through those scripts, see what he suggests, and then figure out how you can make that adaptable to children who might be worshiping at home in the live stream, right? Sometimes watching it is just fine, but you could also invite some other way of participating. So these days we have to think about that. And when Mark wrote those children's time for Angels Among Us years ago, before pandemic, we weren't thinking along these lines. So he and I are both thinking in our scripts and being very cognizant. So you'll see some of that in the Reflecting the Sacred, the brand new one, is that I have started to actually put in the scripts, if you're worshiping with us online, right? So that we can model that interactivity and making sure that we're really connecting with people. Yeah, great. So the children's time, and then we have also begun to make suggestions about children's books, children and youth books that go along with the theme, so that you can use that in your Christian education. So those are some of the things that we're continuing to add to our series. Okay, friends, we're about out of time, so I am going to tell you about goodies because I'm so excited about this. First of all, I have made for you a planning for Advent, pre-Advent calendar. So starting tomorrow, I have made these little cards. I'm going to show you. I have them up in my office here, posted up next to my calendar. And each one, starting tomorrow, it says 24 days before Advent 1. And I have something to encourage you, something to remind you, some way to just keep you focused on these things that we've talked about today, in one card per day. And so we're going to have those available for you in many ways. We'll send you a PDF of them with the recording in the email. We'll also post it in the Worship Design Studio. We also will give you the link to the Canva template so that you could do that. If you're on Canva, you could create, tailor it to your process if you want to. And we'll also be posting these on social media and in the Worship Design Studio each day. So if you'd like to be notified each day, we're going to have a special sign up in the Worship Design Studio where you can get an email whenever I post these things in the Worship Design Studio each day. Okay, excuse me, it's dry here. I need some snow. We have a new social media person on our team, which we're very excited about, Jennifer Yoakum. She's in the chat. She's been chatting away with you. But she has created free social media content ready to go for you to use for our two featured Advent series, the Angels Among Us and Reflecting the Sacred. And so you can use that free social media content. Let me give you a little preview here. Her ministry is called Illuminated Ministry. And so she has made these for us to use free so that you can sort of beta test them for us, use them on your social media channels. Some of them are pictures just JPEGs, and some of them are little videos. So here is an example of that. They're just little videos that kind of just move a little bit. This one is for Angels Among Us. So it's got a feather on there. It has hashtag more hope, which is the first week, and then a little something. So if you'd like to use those, we'd love for you to use those actually in your social media and give us feedback about that. And if you would like help with that at a very reasonable low price, you can get the unbranded ones, and you can brand them with your church thing and use that on your social media. But you can also get Jennifer to help you schedule them. So it's a batch, work in a batch. She can help you schedule those so that they just happen. All right. So it's a great way to be active and keep that message rippling out across the waves. So friends, those are the goodies, and I'm so excited about all the ways that we're getting to collaborate together in making Advent good for you. And I do hope that these 5 things, pausing to reflect, to fill up your well with the light, your jar with the light, immersing yourself, giving your brain the chance to just get saturated with things early here in this month, so that then it's just working in the background, then it comes up in the forefront whenever you need it to. Create together with the ritual artists in your surprise, wonderful, yummy, hygge-fied planning team meeting, hopefully sometime in the next week or next week, and delight by figuring out some way to have a public face to your message, so that you can delight as you see that interaction. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful for all that you do, for all that you are. And if there's anything you need, any help you need, please let us know, because we in the Worship Design Studio want you to never feel like you're alone, and that you never have to start from scratch.